This is Loxley Road, 20,000, 20, rather more than 20,000 years ago, sort of. This is a joke image, obviously. There were mammoths around here, but now this is another joke image. Obviously, it's about the geology of our area, because I think you can understand an awful lot if you understand what's going on underneath our feet, obviously. So here we go. Yeah. So we're sitting on the top of a great pile of stuff. We're quite high up. It's more than 100 feet up here, and there are layers, and the layers are, this is a 19th century image, middle of the 19th century. They drilled down when they were building a well in Wandsworth Prison. And they also did the same on Clapham Common and so on. And as they went down, they took a look at what there was. And this is an image of it. There's a layer of gravel, and below that clay, different kinds of clay, and pebbly rocks and sand at the bottom, and towards the bottom, and right at the very bottom, the chalk. This is the stuff of you know that you did at school many years ago, I'm sure. But this is a more modern image. You can see where we are. I'm trying to. So that's our road. We're on gravel, and curiously, the boundary of the gravel at the top of the hill is actually Ellerton Road, as you can see there, which is marked as the diagonal. Then there's a layer of that clay, and below that, where the word Earl is of Earlsfield, that's lower down still. Now, why? Obviously, because rivers cut through, but so in order, that's gravel, then clay, then sand and gravel. And this is a fanciful image constructed in the end of the 19th century of what London would have looked like before houses. And there are a few references to Roman roads and so on, but you can see it's worth having a quick look round to get your bearings. There's if I can master this. We've got the Isle of Dogs over that side, a nice bend, and then over our side a rather looser bend, and we are. Whoops, and we are here. That's us. We're a kind of a finger, a long finger out. And the reason it works that way is obviously because of, and it's a picture of Wandsworth Common in effect, at the top of hills. It's around 105, 115 feet above much lower ground. And if you were around in the middle of the 19th century and you were standing on Wandsworth Common, not our side, but the other side of Wandsworth Common, you could have seen all the way to St Paul's Cathedral. You could have seen the River Thames, Middle Centre. You could see Westminster and so on. This is from the top of sort of the top, the northeast corner of Wandsworth Common. That obviously certain things have changed. It was very, very countrified, and that's what this image is about. Obviously, in the foreground, you've got your cornfields, so it's just off the edge of the common, but you've also got lots and lots of chimneys, factory chimneys in Battersea and across that way. So I will get the hang of this technology eventually, probably not for another couple of weeks. So that's a close-up. It's a pretty poor image I took it from. The original, which is in the Guildhall, is very, very beautifully detailed. So this is another 19th century image. For some reason, 19th century geologists, scientists and so on just loved this area because they thought many of the basic principles of geology could be demonstrated here. You can see here Wimbledon Common slightly higher than Wandsworth Common, slightly higher than Clapham Common, and these rivers have run right the way way through, and I've indicated the position of Loxley Road, so we're looking north. Now, this is fanciful, but it's a ridge, and I think an awful lot of Loxley Road's subsequent history is explained because we are off a ridge, and the ridge is, there's a Toblerone looking like a ridge, and the ridge is Lyford Road. And if you were to project that in one direction, it's Beechcroft Road to the top right, and in the to the left it will be Heathfield Road. And so the roads that are coming off, and they really are quite sharp. So this is Loxley, Fruin, and so on Herondale, and here we've got Magdalen Road. And I hope we'll see as the evening goes on why this is important. This is an actual map, in fact, from around the end of the, well, it's what date is it? It's around 1911, and the pink line is 100 feet. It's the contour line, and I've put some spot heights, 104, 103, 102, and you get the idea of this ridge, which is interesting because most people would have assumed, if they thought about it at all, that it would be Trinity Road, and it isn't, and it's not the boundary between Wandsworth and Battersea either, which I will mark now in blue because that boundary is over here. So it's a very interesting case of this strip along here being the top of the hill, and so off to the left all the water goes down towards the Wandle, and off to the right it goes to the Falcon Brook, the mighty Falcon Brook. So we are, as it were, Mesopotamia. We're in the middle. Whoops, bear with me, I'll get there in the end. And now back to that image, because I want to look at it in a couple of ways, and then I'll move rapidly onwards towards looking at maps and things which are very close to home. Remember, we're down here on the bottom left. That is a rough approximation of Stane Street, which goes very close to us, the Roman road to Chichester. So we're off to the north and west of it, and it's exactly the same route as the Northern Line now takes. And I wanted to use this map because there was a great big manor called Wandsworth and Battersea, or words to that effect, probably Anglo-Saxon. Certainly, we know that it was owned, as it were, the person in charge was this chap. Obviously it's a Victorian or Edwardian image, but you'll know him better because this is King Harold with an arrow in his eye, and he was the lord of the manor of Wandsworth and Battersea. And when he died, when he was killed, 1066, this anachronistic painting of William took over this manor, but he didn't like Wandsworth and Battersea anywhere near as much as he liked Windsor. So he did a deal. He swapped. So he went to the whatever it was of Westminster Abbey, and they did a deal, and he got Windsor, and Westminster got Wandsworth and Battersea. And this continued until Henry VIII, and as you know, Henry dissolved the monasteries, took a lot of their land and distributed it among his friends. And his best friend at the time was this man, Thomas Cromwell. Thomas Cromwell had a particular enthusiasm for this area because he was born in Putney, and he wanted the set. He wanted all the manors around here, so he had this one as well. But they subdivided Wandsworth and Battersea into a number of different smaller manors, one of the smallest of which was called All Farthing. Now, funnily enough, the word All Farthing is a bit of a mistake, because in fact, Al Farthing in Anglo-Saxon, or whatever it was, actually meant half a farthing, so i.e. an eighth of something, which was a way of saying not very much. And he only enjoyed the benefit of All Farthing Manor, which is where I'm sitting now, and where you're presumably sitting, where Loxley Road is. He only enjoyed it for 7 years because, as you know, he died. It then passed, as these things do, ultimately Elizabeth and so on. Elizabeth has a particular relationship with Wandsworth. She paid for a bridge, not over the Thames, but over the Wandle. And so then it went through James I, and James settled it on Prince Charles. And this is not Prince Charles, obviously this is King Charles I, but he and his friend, whose name is Endymion Porter, and I don't know if that's Wandsworth Common behind him, it might be. Endymion Porter and Prince Charles went to Spain to try to arrange a marriage between Charles and the Infanta of Castile, Anna Maria, and this is a painting by Velázquez of the Infanta, and they were there for 8 months together, so they were very intimate, very, very intimate when they came. Anyway, this is a bit of a joke too, but Infanta of Castile, when the word came back to England, it was misinterpreted as elephant and castle, which is why it's called, the area is called Elephant and Castle. And of course, Charles died, and so his friends also were lost their lands, including Endymion Porter. But there's a very interesting set of court cases in which Endymion Porter actually managed to get the land back, which it was complicated, but he did. And it went down through Porter after Porter after Porter until they ran out of male children. And then the last descendant, who was a woman, she was married to an Irishman called Pierce. The name's just slipped my mind, isn't it? Pierce Walsh, and he changed his name to Pierce Walsh Porter. And then he's generally called Walsh Porter after that, and his son took over as well. And he's quite a character. I can't tell you how much of a character he is, but it is kind of vaguely relevant, as we will see. This map is the earliest map that I know of Wandsworth, of All Farthing Manor. It's Endymion Porter's map that was the basis of obviously all the transactions. Just, it's quite difficult to interpret when you first look at it. For one thing, it's round the wrong way, in the sense that because All Farthing is a kind of horizontal, long, thin bit. Now, it might help you if I show you, if I mark with a rectangle, Garrett Green, and then with a line, or with a rectangle, that's Burntwood Lane. Down at the bottom, we've got the Wandle, and above it a wobbly line, which is Garrett Lane. These are old, very old roads. And then up here, this is interesting, this area here, I wonder if I can make it any larger. Perhaps I have to go to the next image. I think that's exactly what I have to do to make it clearer. So, whoops, bear with me. Go away. Right. This is a bit closer. This is more like us. Just spend a couple of seconds on this, because it has an immense bearing on everything that happened around our area subsequently. As you can, now, what I suspect happened was Thomas Cromwell probably made a lot of fields, and in those days a field was enormous, but a small enclosure was called a close, and if it was farmed, it was called a shot around here anyway. And some areas were strongly walled or fenced off, to grow wood, because obviously deer would eat growing wood. So this is the burnt wood on the right-hand side of Burntwood Road and so on. But it wasn't, I think what burnt wood meant was this was a charcoal wood. Charcoal was very, very valuable because good strong heat and so on, it's easier to transport and what have you. And I'm pretty sure that burnt wood, what it meant was that this is a wood dedicated to coppicing that would then make charcoal. Just so you get your bearings, sorry about all these funny lines that I'm failing miserably to draw. This along the top is roughly what is going to become Loxley Road. There was no road up there at all. As I said, this is Burntwood up here. So this is something like Lyford, and then it leads into Heathfield, and we are there. That's us. That's where our road will be, and it will align itself along with that wall or fence or whatever it is, or hedge. And as you can see, it's called Fursey Close, and nearly all of them are called Fursey this and Fursey that, because I think these fields have been created on behalf for Thomas Cromwell for sheep. And you had this endless battle with people, because sheep were worth more than people were in a way, but by this time I just think that the land just couldn't support the sheep or whatever, so it's really not very good land. But what Endymion Porter and subsequent generations made their money from was the wood. And there's a very interesting little area up the top here. I just changed colour, which is this area here, called All Farthing Peace. History is going to be determined by this, because Wandsworth and Battersea, the manors, were split. They had the common and the common land, and people needed the common land for their animals to graze and to collect firewood and so on. But All Farthing Manor, this newly created small manor, had no common land for its people. So a little patch was given called the All Farthing Peace. And anyway, we will see what happens. Keep your eyes open for what happens to that in history, because it is fateful. I've imposed our roads on the map, but very roughly. It's obviously impossible to be absolutely certain where they are, but this is roughly it. The extreme right-hand side, the B, is obviously Burntwood. E across the middle is Ellerton, and so on, Loxley, and you can see All Farthing Peace up there. The R is Routh, and the A is Alma Terrace, the D is Dorset, and T is Trinity. There was no Trinity Road or anything remotely like it then. It just did not exist. And here we are. This is him again. Now, when it descended to Pierce Walsh Porter, who changed his name to Pierce Walsh Porter, he was an aesthete. He just loved, and he was a great intimate of George when he was regent, before he was regent, in fact, and he advised him on matters of art and bought art for him and bought his own terrific art collection, and helped him with, this is Carlton House, the George's Palace in St James's, and you can see those lovely columns, which you may or may not know, ended up when they knocked Carlton Terrace down, Carlton Palace House down. They ended up as the National Gallery. And one of the reasons I've included this picture is because these fountains here, these fountains, all of them were built by the people who built your house. The Holloway brothers also had the commission to build the fountains in Trafalgar Square. So there we are. Off. another view, not adding anything to the story. Porter also advised on the decoration, interior decoration of the Brighton Pavilion and so on. Why is this relevant? Well, it's reason he had several homes and he just loved cottages. He invented, in a lot of ways, he was the exemplary cottage builder. And they weren't small cottages, but they were quite cute and what have you. And one of his homes was by the River Thames, Craven Cottage, which is the home of Fulham Football Club now, obviously after his house burnt down in the 1880s. But you can see that the kind of visual reference to cottages in the up here in the and so on, and that's a picture of Craven Cottage. Well, the other cottage he had, and this was his home, was called Burntwood Cottage, and it's a bit hard to read, but I've transcribed it here. Cottage villa, pleasure ground, sheet of water, walled garden, 35 acres of meadowland. This is when, after he died, and he had to, and the family sold it off. A very unique Cottage Ornee of tasteful elevation with a nice frontage known as Burntwood Cottage, formerly the retreat of Porter Esquire, delightfully situated on Wandsworth Common, commanding most extensive and picturesque scenery, including Lord Spencer's Park, the Surrey Hills, Epsom Downs, etc., surrounded by its own ornamental grounds, gardens, acres of meadowland, with all suitable attached and detached offices, coach house, stabling plentifully supplied with water. Do you know where this was? I'll give you a moment to think, but only a moment. It's where you are now. It's Burntwood Cottage grew through the 19th century before it was knocked down, just prior to building these houses. We'll return to that. We'll return to that probably in a bit. Incidentally, the views over Lord Spencer's Park. For a long while I thought, Lord Spencer's Park, Spencer Park, doesn't make any sense. But of course, what that meant was Wimbledon Park. In those days, if it wasn't for the houses in between, it was a very fine place. And there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 marvelous, huge houses just this side of the ridge that I've been talking about. One was called Wandsworth House. That was further down what's now called Trinity Road. Then there was a cluster of 3, 2 Burntwoods and Collamore. So Burntwood Grange, Burntwood something or other, and Burntwood, and then the house that was here, Burntwood House, that had been Burntwood Cottage. Well, it's a long, complicated story, which I would love to tell you about. But Walsh Porter ran out of money, his family, and there was a complicated deal. His wife's father was a rich reverend gentleman called Scroop, and Scroop's great friend was a Reverend Thomas Shepherd, and Thomas Shepherd's great friend was the Reverend Martin Ralph. And why this is all important is because Thomas Shepherd, at the end of the 18th century, acquired all of this land, and he died soon after because he died soon after. And this is the land that Shepherd left his widow, Sophia Shepherd. Sophia Shepherd was Martin Ralph's sister. And all of this land is going to go within a very few years to Martin Ralph and Magdalen College. This is a kind of close-up of it. Of course, we've got the angles have changed again. So now this is Burntwood Lane is along there onto the Common. This is Garrett Lane. Up through there, the new railway in around 1840, as you can see at the top. I don't think it had actually been. This is a map from 1840. It's a tithe map, and by this time you can see here. So if I let's try this. This is Burntwood House. had been Burntwood Cottage. You can see the blue sheet of water that was advertised. This road up, this is Lyford, and then Heathfield. This is the toast rack off to the right. All of the pink splodges are fields that Sophia Shepherd owned. And here I've just for fun oriented it more conventionally. So this is what she had. She had different blocks. She bought and sold blocks. She had a lot more in the end of her life, which was at the end of the 1840s. And so that's it. I'll just go backwards and forwards so you can get a rough idea of what's going on. And I've marked in sort of purpley, mucky, pink, whatever, our road down there. You can see how it all sort of fits together. When she died, there are no images that I know of her. When she died, she was buried in a church in Thiel, Tilehurst, outside of Reading, and that's her cenotaph. And this is Martin Ralph, who was the president of Magdalen College. And because this land, and she had many other blocks of land and so on, and shares and what have you, all went to Magdalen College, and that's Magdalen College on May Day, on a May Day. And as you may or may not know, practically every road around here, not every road, but 95% of the roads around here are named after somebody or some place or what have you connected with Magdalen College. So, for example, Ralph himself, Ralph Road was one of the first roads to be built around here up the top on the gravel. The road at right angles to it, Baskerville Road, Ralph was a classical scholar. Baskerville was a printer who had designed the most beautiful Greek and Latin script. He was the university printer at Cambridge, not Oxford. So Baskerville gets rated as the first road that was built, and then some of the other roads were built off. And every one of these roads has some kind of, with a few exceptions, has an intimate connection with Magdalen. So moving rapidly onwards, how much time have I taken? Rather more than I should have done. This is the earliest map that I know of. That shows the whole of Wandsworth Common. This is a map from 1740, 41 or something like that. It's John Rock's map. It looks a bit impressionistic, but in fact it's got remarkable detail in it. I won't go into it in any detail, but I've marked it up a little bit so you get a bit better idea. You've got the roads, the blue lines obviously are the rivers, the Falcon Brook on the right, and on the left the Wandle. Countless things of interest to say about this, but this isn't the time and the place, unfortunately. But what you can see is Wandsworth Common was twice or maybe even 3 times the size it is today. Another interesting, I know it's a digression, sorry about that, I can't stop myself. If this works, I will use the rectangle. This is curious here. There are 3 huge lakes. So the Falcon Brook, which at that time was not underground, underneath the Northcote Road in a pipe, but there are 3 enormous lakes. So they were big lakes, and that is Clapham Junction. That's St John's Road. That when that was filled in, they put the road in to make, and so at the top end you've got Arding and Hobbs and so on. So that's rather curious. And then the river carries on down to the Thames. So I'm not going to get very much done, am I? That's the little bit of this is a very early map from the 1770s. I'm just going to flick through just in case anything comes up, but it with a bit of luck it'll show you what range of resources. Oh, by the way, yes, that was, I remember we talked about the all-farthing piece, this piece of common that was snaffled, I think probably by Thomas Cromwell. Well, that is it now. It's the toast rack. So because these different manors, Wandsworth, Battersea or Farthing had different owners with very different policies about what should happen to their land. That's why there's this great big bite out of Wandsworth Common, which is the All Farthing piece. The rest of it was in this. I'll just indicate where the manor manorial boundary was. The manorial boundary was sort of here. So this land here is Wandsworth, and this land here is Battersea. And it has quite a complicated relationship with the gardens here, but that's for another time maybe. So, right, go for it. Go. Hang on. Not very good at this, am I? And this is Burnt Cottage again. It's we talked about it earlier. That just running through some images. This is 1841, the tithe map, and that's where we are now. You know, I guess I'm about here. Yes. This is now Trinity Road. This vertical brown line. You can see the water features there. This is early 1860s, and things are just beginning to look a bit more like they are now. There are countless things that we could look at, and I'll stop in a second to look at some of the maps. But there's Burntwood House, more or less, just off to the left of dead centre. You'll notice the observatory. I don't know whether you know this. If you do, if you don't, I don't know. But at one time, this observatory here, which is just around the corner from us, the nearest to the common, on the common, just there, the observatory was the largest telescope in. Oops! Whoops! Largest. Whoops! Honestly, and that is a photograph of that. Of it when it was already quite old, and it's taken by a young photographer whose name's Geoffrey Bevington, who lived on the side of Wandsworth Common. He lived a bit not very far from here, but this is his amazing photograph. And he took literally hundreds of photographs. He died very young, but there's some absolute crackers among them. But the perspective of this, just so that you know, is we're on what's now called the scope, or the rough bit of the common, or bushy common, or whatever you call it, and we're looking back towards what will be life. It didn't exist then, and this house here is more or less on the corner of Loxley. Here's another view of it, another photograph. It's looking in the opposite direction. This is when it was still in use, and there are countless things to say about this. You notice, among other things, no trees, or almost no trees anyway. It was rough ground. It was really not like it is today. In the distance, we can see that building there. A very large building is St James's Industrial School for naughty boys, and perhaps at sometimes naughty girls as well. And it turned into St James's workhouse, and from a workhouse into a workhouse infirmary, and from a workhouse infirmary into a hospital, St James's Hospital. And then it all got knocked down, and houses were built on there. But the road by the side of it, obviously, is called St James's as a result. And the reason it's called St James's is because the person who was by this time the Lord of the Manor, one of the Earls Spencer, he had a huge palatial home in St James's Parish in the West End of London, on the edge of Green Park. So you see the word St James's crops up quite a bit, and a lot of his associates ended up around here. This is an artist, a kind of Photoshop impression of what it would have looked like and when it was there in the 1850s. Now I'm just going to rattle through these, but you can see the big houses here down at the bottom. You've got Collamore, Burntwood Lodge, and Burntwood Grange. Many of these are commemorated in road names now, but they've and some bits of wall still exist, and you can see these old fields, which are relics probably of Thomas Cromwell's fields. And there is the house. There's Burntwood House, and notice also there's the Rough Common, but up here it's nurseries. This area had lots and lots of different nurseries. That looks like a tree nursery of some sort, rather than vegetables or what have you, because I think the soil just wouldn't have borne vegetables. But I know that there were 15 acres of rose bushes that were used to provide rose, whatever it is that makes perfume. And at the top left, of course, which really caused problems, top left, that's Wandsworth Prison. By putting Wandsworth Prison there, and down at the bottom here, the lunatic asylum, and then across a little bit higher up, the orphanages and so on, the social character of the area was compromised. There's a rather wonderful map of a diagram, really, of this was the only time that the Ordnance Survey made almost impressionistic maps. They became much more rigorous and restricted in their ways that they represented things. But you can see what it was like again, just to remind you what's probably completely obvious to you now. This is going to be us. That's going to be Routh Road, and this is going to be Loxley Road, and we get some interesting things happen. Right, very quickly. You ask yourself, how did anybody come to own such a huge house, to buy it, not from Walsh Porter himself, but after a couple of other people? How did they do it? Well, nearly everybody who owned houses around here, they were industrialists of some sort, or merchants and what have you. And the person who owned Burntwood House in the 1860s, 70s, 80s was a man called Da Costa. And Da Costa made his money from pulmonic wafers. He sold quack medicines, and there are hundreds of adverts. He loved, funnily enough, many of his adverts appear in first editions of Dickens novels, because to fund printing of novels in those days, you often had 5, 10, 15, 20 pages of adverts. And this, I don't know which one this is from, but I know I've got some of his adverts from Bleak House, from Oliver Twist, and so on. I'm going to just look at this one. I was so much oppressed at my chest that when I lay down, a coughing fit came on with such violence that I have often thought I should not live to see the morning. But now I can sleep a whole night without coughing, after having taken only 2 boxes of wafers, Dr. Locock's pulmonic wafers. To singers and public speakers, they are invaluable for clearing and strengthening the voice. He also produced female pills, anyway, it will be interesting to I think you can probably imagine what they're about. But anyway, consumption is prevented, chlorosis, general weakness, accompanied by weariness and sinking at the pit of the stomach, feverishness, indigestion, flatulence, loss, etc., etc. Anyway, it was good, but then it's not surprising that after a few years, somebody in the Lancet should write a letter to the Lancet complaining about poisoning by Dr. Locock's pulmonic wafers. He didn't last, well, he did actually last around here for another 20 odd years, but he did die 1886. His residence, Burntwood, Wandsworth Common. Then it was sold very, very swiftly. And this is the picture in about 1900. Now, what's interesting is the vicarage is already there. You can see that there, the vicarage on the corner, and that was created for the new new church of Mary Magdalene that had nothing to do with Magdalen College, incidentally, nothing at all. But behind, there's still no houses built other than the vicarage, and there's something here. So there's the vicarage, which is on the corner. There's that house there, and there's this, which I think is currently called Slane House, but it has had other names. But you notice there was a big playing field here, and I'm just going to dash through these. If you look at the vicarage, you can see the road goes about 6 inches away from the window, and that's because there had been quite a nice orchard in front, but when they extended Routh Road to the southwest, they had to, it was difficult to fit it all in. This is a few years later, in which the houses around the edge are mostly built, but notice that there's no Malton Road, Titchwell, or the other road. Spaces have been left for them, but there's a big field in the middle, and it was still used as a playing field, this area here. Oops, what have I done? That wasn't supposed to happen, was it? That wasn't supposed to happen. Now I'm panicking because I don't know what's going wrong. Clear. Oh, here it is again. There we are. And I have a wonderful autobiography. Somebody who lived here. Fantastic book. And she talks about this 11-acre field behind her house. It's playing nonsense. It's not helping me at all. So just to finish off, here we are. Early 1911 or thereabouts, pretty much exactly as it is now. Loxley Road. Our area hasn't changed very much at all. No, it's a bit later than that, isn't it? This is late 1920s. And new houses have been built down here, Openview and Tilehurst and so on. And that's a recent aerial view, because it looks pretty. And that's all for now, folks. Do contact me by email, historyboys@chargeofthelightbrigade.com. Thank you very much.
Philip, thank you so much. Fantastic speech. Really enjoyed it. Can I just ask you one question?
Please do.
On the map that you showed of Burntwood House, there was a picture of a lake.
Yeah.
That lake is obviously gone. Is it very at the top behind your house? Is it very wet?
Yeah, it is at number. I'm told that 2, 4, 6 are very wet. Can you hear me?
Yes, no, I can.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I think it's underneath the road there, actually. But the back garden of Pam's house, she just has to dig down a foot, and it fills in with water.
Is there a sort of a spring behind your houses?
It could be a spring. I imagine it is, yes, because this whole area, this complex of gravel and clay and what have you, means that the whole area is indeed very wet. When I was, I should stop because you need to ask me questions. But when I was young around here in the 50s, the rough part of Wandsworth Common, what I call the rough part, or the bushy common, we didn't call it scope in those days, was always wet. Was always really, really, really wet, and almost no trees on it. But now, since trees have come, they obviously transpire, and the whole place is a lot drier, much drier than it was, which is why there's so little of that Molinia grass, which is associated with wet areas.
That would make sense. Has anybody got any other questions? Because nobody's texted any questions.
People can speak their questions.
Yes, unmute yourself if you've got a question.
Philip, I've got a question. Thank you. It's really, really interesting, I've got to say. The lady who did the autobiography.
Yeah.
Who was she?
Her name was P.Y. Phyllis Yvonne I'll send you an email. Why is it, as soon as I'm asked a direct question, my brain goes.
Don't worry.
But I can say to everybody, it is one of the best books you'll ever read in your whole life. She was absolutely amazing. I put off reading it for years, thinking, oh, it's an old person like me writing about their past, and it's going to be really, really dull. It isn't. It's sensational. She lived on Magdalen Road until she was 30. And her mother had born and brought up round here, and so on Bolingbroke and then on Nightingale Lane. But it is the most remarkable book. She's a phenomenal Betts. That's right, Betts. Phyllis Yvonne Betts, and it's called People Who Say Goodbye. People Who Say Goodbye. It's about the First World War, and it's got the best description of death on Magdalen Road. And throughout the First World War, of course, there were 5-10 funerals a day going down from the the General Hospital, which was the Royal Victoria Patriotic Building at that time, the 3rd London General Hospital. There were so many people dying there that, and all of them were buried in Magdalen Road Cemetery. So there was a constant flow of funerals, which she describes absolutely brilliantly.
Wow.
She's wickedly funny as well, by the way.
Good. No. I'll find that. I'll definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Philip.
Pleasure. More questions?
Any other questions? No. Well, I think we need to let Philip have a good glass of wine after that. But thank you very much indeed.
Yeah,
thank you for being so patient.
Thank you, Philip.
Thank you
Very
very much.
interesting.
That was brilliant.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Questions?
Bye.
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 Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.